ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.
August 28th, 1955, a little boy from Chicago, which is in the news a lot, had a 75-pound fan wrapped around his body after he was brutalized over several days in a barn and tossed in the Tallahatchie River. His name was Emmett Till, and they buried him. They buried him because they didn't want any of the brutality that they did to this little body to become public. But his mother said, no, dig my baby up and bring him home. And she, Mamie Till Mobley, had his body viewed by everyone. It was in a casket. It was bloated. It was horrific. It was on the cover, I think, of Jet magazine. I remember seeing it, the image of Emmett Till and the carnage that they exacted upon his body. And some papers were released this week, I think. Maybe we had somebody call up, it was last week, and to talk about it. And Kevin Powell was like, let's get the filmmaker, the award-winning filmmaker who put his blood, sweat, and tears into the movie Till that starred Whoopi Goldberg and Deadwyler, Danielle Deadwyler is what, am I getting her name right? Yes.
That's
Let
right.
me welcome, let me welcome filmmaker, producer, and co-writer of Till, Keith Beauchamp. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you, Jordan?
I'm good. So, I know you were reached out to, and
Yes.
as the relative was talking about it, I was thinking, the release of the papers around the anniversary of his death. For what? We know what happened. You know what happened. We've been talking about it. We had Arthur Thompson on, who wrote a book,
Right,
The
Thompson.
Barn. Yeah. Oh my
Yes.
God, that book had me in a like this. It was so incredible. Just taking the place where he died and immortalizing that barn, and then telling the story of the folk. The brutality of that town and that county.
That's
What
right.
should we know about these papers? What do you know? Is there anything revelatory coming out about it?
Well, first I have to applaud the Civil Rights Cold Case Review Board, which is an independent entity from DOJ and the FBI. And they were put in place by law to help with the expediting files that the public may have interest with, and family. So I have to first do that. I have been what we call a Till scholar for over 30 years. I was the filmmaker who prompted the case to be reopened in 2004. I am also the filmmaker who was involved with the reopening of the case in 2017, and so on. So this has been my blood, sweat, and tears. Emmett Till's mother, the late Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley, was my mentor and friend for 8.5 years, until she passed away. I say all this to say is that the release of the files, I applaud, because it's very important for the public to understand not just the historical context of Till, but where we're at right now currently, and why we did not get the justice that we should have gotten in his case. Now, as you know, the case was reopened in 2004 and opened again in 2017, closed in 2021, and in 2022 as well. The investigation was sort of reopened again and went to a grand jury. But it's in 2023 when Carolyn Bryant Dunham, one of the last remaining perpetrators that we know of, but the woman who was at the center of the case, passed on. So the question is, why wasn't she ever brought to justice? Well, with the urging of a number of people, including myself, the review board decided to start basically releasing these files. Now, the first batch that they release, I don't feel has anything in it. If you want to be a student of history and you want to learn about the behind the scenes and how everything was handled with the Till case in 1955 by the federal government, then that's fine. But there's really nothing there because all that's in these files is the correspondence between many civil rights leaders and J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, everyone asking for federal intervention in the Emmett Till case in the Mississippi Delta. And of course, the FBI, Justice Department has always stood behind that they never had jurisdiction. At the time, they were arguing the Lindbergh kidnapping statute, but it didn't apply to the Emmett Till case because of the fact that in order for that law to apply, Emmett had to be kidnapped and taken over state property, state lines and things of that nature, which would have made it federal jurisdiction. But there's so much more that has to be released with these files. The first batch was only from 1955 to 1960s, and there was really no investigation. So we shouldn't talk about that.
Right.
The FBI investigated the case. There was no investigation at that time. All they were doing is collecting information.
Let's pause for a second because there's been a lot of talk about law enforcement.
That's right.
And if the foundation of law enforcement is protection of property, if law enforcement very rarely prevents crime, it's there after a crime is committed. And in the case of the FBI, as today, the FBI has been a very complicated body who, from McCarthy to J. Edgar Hoover to Cash Patel, has not necessarily been a friend. There's a file on Aretha Franklin. They had an FBI file on the file on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all of the Black Panthers and demonizing and calling these people dangerous and threats to society, put crosshairs on all of these folks and their lives. And Fred Hampton's not here. The FBI had a file and there was an action committed. So it's difficult, Keith, to have a discussion about the FBI when historically they have not necessarily been, forthcoming with good information to actually solve issues as it relates to Black people and bring justice.
Absolutely. And I agree with you, Karen. But the Civil Rights Cold Case Review Board is not the FBI. They're a part of NARA that holds all the important files in these cases. And so I know some of the folks on the review board, and I think they're there to really help. Now, in terms of the history of the FBI has always been the FBI, unfortunately. I had the unique opportunity to work with the FBI for a period of time because of my work with Emmett Till. I actually inspired their Civil Rights Cold Case Initiative, which later becomes the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act. And this allows us to go back and revisit civil rights murder cases from our past to see if they warrant new investigations and possible prosecutions. So that was actually established by President Bush in 2000, the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crimes Act. In 2008, reauthorized by President Obama, and it eventually supported by Trump. And so, but I don't think people realize there's some of these things happening behind the scenes. Now, do we have this great cooperation from the Trump administration? I would have to say no. But there are those of us who are still behind the scenes trying to work our way through and and looking at these cases in hopes of getting closure to these families. And so it's a quite interesting time that we're in and working in the midst of all that is happening and just hoping and somehow that we could get, justice and closure for those who really need it.
Keith Beauchamp is here, award-winning filmmaker, co-writer, and producer of Till. The story of Emmett Till is chilling, gripping, beautiful, inspirational, and I think it's inspirational because every day I'm asking people to do something, and Mamie Till, in the face of the kind of terrorism that was existing in Mississippi at the time, and it was one of the most brutal places for Black people on this planet.
That's right.
She did something that was beyond courageous, and her family members did beyond courageous things that could have cost them their lives, and many of them had to leave and flee the county forever. And putting her baby's body on display was an act of resistance that I don't know many of us could have done. The kind of strength she had doing that. Walk us through what happened to Emmett Till for people who have never heard his name, which would seem unfathomable. But there are people that didn't know about Black Wall Street, didn't know
That's
about
right.
Rosewood until John Singleton immortalized it in film. So tell us,
Yes.
tell us what
Let me
happened.
see if I can give you a brief synopsis. Well, Emmett Till in 1955, 14-year-old Chicago youth, went to the Mississippi Delta to visit his Southern relatives. Within a week's time, Emmett is abducted from his great uncle's home and tortured for one of the oldest taboos of the South, addressing a white woman in public. Two men, Roy Bryant and J.W. Marlin, were soon arrested, but later acquitted in the court of law by an all-white, all-male jury. Then 4 months after this dreadful crime, Roy Bryant and J.W. Marlin would confess to the murder of Emmett Lewis Till to a reporter by the name of William Bradley Huey, who would then publish their story in Lick magazine. And of course, this story sparked shockwaves across the globe, and many felt it would cause a change, and unfortunately, a change that we're still currently fighting for. But what made this story so significant and powerful was the courageous act of my good friend and my mentor, the late Mrs. Mamie Till Mobley, who defied all the odds and made sure that the world would not forget her son by having an open casket funeral. And you mentioned that earlier. And it was this open casket funeral that eventually was published in some newspapers, and the photographs of Emmett Till was published in Jet magazine, that eventually woke the sleeping giant of Black people across the globe. And it's because of this movement, the American Civil Rights Movement then mobilized into position. So it was Dr. King, who was 26 years old at the time. He was taking on the Montgomery bus boycott. A lot of people don't know that it wasn't just because of Rosa Parks' courageous decision not to get up from her seat on that bus in Montgomery, Alabama, that he chose to do this. He knew the story of Emmett Till. He was angry about what happened to Emmett Till. He felt that the Emmett Till lynching was an intimidation factor to keep African Americans from the voting polls. 1955 was the election year. Sister Rosa Parks, who I had the honor of knowing because of Mother Mobley, Emmett Till's mother, sat with her. She said to me there was Emmett Till foremost in her mind that day when she decided not to get up from her seat on that bus in Montgomery, Alabama. So it is very significant when you talk about civil rights history as well as the civil rights movement that we do not forget Emmett Till. Ironically, I know we talked about August 28th, tomorrow being the anniversary. It is also the anniversary of the 62nd anniversary of the March on Washington. So why is that day so significant, August 28th? Well, A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, who was inspired by the lynching of Emmett Till, chose that particular day, August 28th, of significance to be able to memorialize Emmett, but also channel that same energy that came out of Emmett Till's death that influenced the 1957 Civil Rights Acts and so on. And so it is very important that now that we're going to the 70th anniversary, that we all consider putting Emmett Till's story in its rightful context in history. Because without his lynching, perhaps we would have never heard the likes of Dr. Martin Luther King or Sister Rosa Parks.
Keith Beauchamp is here. Till Till Freedom, Till, till freedom come.com,
That's right.
till freedom come. Check that out. What message can we be inspired by today? As fear creeps into so many of our psyches and anxiety around what can happen.
That's right.
I'm even thinking, what happens if the midterms don't happen the way they should? What happens if they, declare no vote? Like, what's the strategy? And you're talking about a time
Yes.
when Black people couldn't vote, right? Emmett Till, there was no
That's right.
recourse. They snatched that baby out of that bed in the wee hours of the morning because they could, and nobody could stop them.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What do we learn from that, and how do we use that to resist today, or not
Mm.
just resist? Because
Yeah. Yeah.
resistance is not even on the table. This
That's
is
right.
not just resistance.
No, absolutely not. I think we need to all be conscious on how movements were made. And this is why I have spent over 30 years of my life telling the story of Emmett Till. I truly believe that Mother Mobley had man's blueprint to man's liberation when it comes to racial progression in this country. Racial progression in America, in this harsh reality in which we live, has only happened through the blood, sweat, and the death of the Black body. That's the only time we have all ever seen change. And I set this up to say that there were times Mother Mobley and I would be on the phone, and she would always tell me over and over again, Keith, you must continuously tell Emmett's story until man's consciousness is risen, because only then there would mean justice for Emmett Till. And she's also always said to me, I may go out, fight the good fight. I may get courtroom justice for Emmett, but it's not going to stop all the Emmett Tills of the world from happening. So what she was trying to instill in me is the fact that although Emmett's death, lynching, took place in 1955, we still have a lot of Emmett Tills of today. So when you think about Black and brown who are killed on the streets of America, whether it's at the hands of those who are sworn to protect us or at the hands of white supremacists, those are the Emmett Tills of today. And the way she called it, the way she pegged it, these are legalized lynchings. And so it is very important that we acknowledge these things. And I know we see death every day. It's not natural for us to see death every day. But we need to be aware that these are moments where we're supposed to really gather together and fight on and fight against the system that continuously kill us in this manner. And so your second question was, and I guess this is your question that you just gave me. It's not your second question. Where do we go from here? How do we get past this? Those of us who have dedicated our lives to the work know already this is just another moment in that journey. There's a lot of people out there who are, me, myself, we're racially fatigued. We're struggling to survive. We're struggling to get by and trying to understand the atmosphere that we in. But a lot of people know me. I live by quotes. Nothing that we have gone through today, Karen, we haven't gone through before. Things may have cosmetically changed, but the fight for civil and human rights remains the same. That's something you have to keep in your head. You also need to understand that the struggle, our fight, is a continuous one. It was made to never end. And so when you have that knowledge and those things in your head, then you know that we're not running, pacing ourselves, running a small race. It is a marathon, and you're going to have to take some time. But I do have solace. And in the words of our good brother, Amiri Baraka, he says, there's no justice in America. It's the pursuit of justice that sustains you. So regardless of what we're going through and what we hear today and the struggle that you see before you, it's because of what's in us, that spirit in us, that we're going to continue on regardless, and so that's where I find solace in this struggle that we in. What we're seeing that Donald Trump and the administration is doing is nothing different, which is why I continue to tell the story of Emmett Till, because there's no other story that speaks more to this generation, political and racial climate than the story of Emmett Till. It is exact mirror image to what we are going through. Back in 1955, they were fighting against not just the white supremacy system, but the system of the white citizens' councils. The language that Donald Trump has been speaking is the language of the citizens' councils. So it's very important that we educate ourselves, not only about the past, but where we're going towards the future. But it's very important because we need to understand these keywords that are being said and put out there so you know what's coming next. They're literally going by the playbook of the White Citizens Councils of 1955.
So what's next? What's coming next, Keith?
What's coming next for me? I'm going to be on the front lines.
No. What's coming next in this? What's coming next? You said we got to be paying attention to what's.
I truly believe we're going to get through this. But we're not angry yet. And things are going to get a lot worse before they get better. I just fear that we're all so shocked and we don't want to move, or we feel like we can't do anything, that we could be setting ourselves up for a second Jim Crow.
Oh, it's here.
Well, it's here. But it's not on the level where it could be. And I just fear that. But my faith and the hope that I have in our people, we're a resilient people. And like I said, this is nothing new. We've been through this before. We've done this before. So I just think that now is very important that collectively we come together and we form these bonds, these tight bonds that is needed right now. We don't have time for that individuality anymore.
That's right.
We can't sit back and stand idle by while we see injustices happen before our eyes, whether it's us as a people or some other nationality or race, because eventually we are the ones that's going to be hurting the most. So it's very important that we don't have those people, because I hate this. I go out and do lectures all the time. And we often have people who never thinks about social justice or human rights until an injustice is at their front door. And that's problematic, because when it's at your door, it's too late at that point. So it's very important that we find some kind of way to attach ourselves to a cause, to this ongoing fight, because as people of color, we're obligated to do it. We're born into the activism. The simple fact that you're breathing and walking in this country, you're walking protests. So it's up to you if you're going to turn on that switch or not. Rather do it now than later, because most of the time, if you do it later, it's too late. That injustice is something that you're facing. But if you do it now collectively with like-minded people, we could build a powerful army to fight against what we're dealing with today.
I couldn't agree more. Before I let you go, we have a minute. Danielle Deadwyler, we had her on to talk about 40 Acres.
Yes.
Did you see 40 Acres, Keith?
I saw it. Yes.
All right. Do you recommend that as a?
Look, Danielle, I love her. We found out that we're related, by the way, at the end of Till.
We all related. We all cousins, okay?
Yes. Right? I gotta support my sister, my cousin. She's just a beautiful and amazing actor, I should say. And I'm still salty that she did not get the nomination that she should have in terms of the Oscars. And so it's kind of frustrating, but I'm glad that she's out there making her mark. She made her own path, and she's a force to be reckoned with. And I know it's going to be more great things that come out of her as well. So yes.
Well, yes, I hope she comes back. Congratulations on a baby who's also a Taurus, like Danielle, like me. So you're going to have a good time, sir. And congratulations on everything, Keith Beauchamp.
We're ready. We're prepared. Do not give in to fear. We are fearless. This is not the time to be afraid. This is a time to stand up and fight back and to resist any temptation for them to divide us. We're in this together. The rule of law is on our side. We will not give in, not give up. We will not capitulate. We will not bow. We will not bend. We will survive.